Now we're going to go through properly inserting the bobbin on this is a Singer quantum stylus, but many of your modern plastic shell machines are very similar to this, where you can see the bobbin case in here, but it's got kind of a guide. So we have our bobbin, and we're going to cover specifics on bobbins in week 3 or part 3, which is how to make sure you're using the correct bobbin. But for today, we're just going to talk about threading. So I have my wound bobbin, and I'm using red so you can see a little bit better. But for drop-in bobbins, it's almost a universal rule that when you put your bobbin in, it needs to be winding counterclockwise. So you can see the way the thread is winding onto the bobbin is counterclockwise. If you put it in the wrong way, you're going to have all kinds of stitch issues. So I get this a lot with my newer customers that are fairly new to sewing, where they don't realize that this has to be inserted. Now, this machine doesn't have it, not even on the case, but sometimes on our modern machines, there's either a little sticker over here to the side, or sometimes the little bobbin cover will have a little graphic that reminds you that this needs to go wind counterclockwise. So what we're going to do is you're going to place your bobbin in there. And once it's in there, you're going to take your thread, and there is a little notch. Let me see. I will post a picture so that you can see what I'm talking about. But there's a little notch that puts the thread into the tension, and you're going to pull on it. So you can see it just slips behind that little silver. There's a little silver lip here, and now I can pull it smoothly. Now, some machines have an entire path over here, and I'll show you an example in a future one where it has a path where you wind through and it cuts the thread. I always leave my tail here. And what I like to do, even if you have an automatic thread cutter, even if you have the path that guides you through to cut it, leave your tail. Then you're going to hold the tail of your upper thread, and you're going to turn your hand wheel toward you. Let the needle go below the plate, and you're going to see it pick up the bobbin thread and pull it around. And it's going to give you both tails, so you have them above the needle plate. I always, when I put a new bobbin in or have to rethread the bobbin, I always do this and start my sewing off with both tails at the top. So again, if you have that little thread path, ignore it. Just do it this way, and that'll give you cleaner stitches and less tension issues as you get started on your sewing. And then, of course, when you're done, you would put your plate back on your machine. So now we're going to cover doing the bobbin on the modern Brother. This is not just for Brother. This also would be Baby Lock. There's so many that use this design, but I want to show you what I'm talking about with the thread path. So let me zoom in down here. And I have our bobbin already wound, and I used red thread so you can see what's going on. Again, now on this machine, there's actually an illustration that you can see here, and it's a bobbin, and it's showing you that the thread is winding counterclockwise, and then it goes through the thread path here. Now, this particular machine has this piece of plastic that's covering the actual tension spring of the bobbin case. I think this is both blessing and a curse, because maybe in theory it keeps thread and lint from getting down into the tension and affecting your tension. However, I feel like it kind of cheats the customer, because you're really just using their guide instead of seeing the bobbin case itself. So here's what I like to do, and this is my personal rule anytime I have a customer's machine that I need to test sew with to find out what's going on. Because if you don't do this part correctly, you will have terrible results. So we're going to drop our bobbin in, and it has you drawing it around this plastic piece, which means it's going into the tension of the bobbin. And normally it has you going this way where it breaks off the thread. Then you put your cover on and you start sewing. I think that this is where a lot of issues happen. When you're starting off with this thread this way, your first stitches are really garbled and gross looking, but also it does sometimes take a while for the machine to sort itself out. So I have a different rule. I almost never, ever use these guides. Even on my personal sewing, I always do this method. So you're going to drop your bobbin in, and you're still going to have to draw this around, but we're going to stop here and leave a tail. And then we're going to take and hold the upper thread tail with our left hand. Make sure it's under your foot. You're going to take the hand wheel. You're going to turn it toward you, take it all the way down and back up. And then it's going to pull up. You just saw it catch the bobbin thread, and it's going to pull up that bobbin thread, and now you have both your tails up here at the top. So even if there's an automatic thread cutter or what have you, I do this method every single time so that I have control of both these threads when I start sewing. Especially if you're having issues with your machine and you're trying to figure out the issue, this is going to eliminate any issues with it trying to catch that thread. I will also say if you're using a modern machine that has a needle up down, when you get to this point where you drop your bobbin in and you feed it through and you have your tail, you can hit the threader, or I'm sorry, the needle up down, and it's going to automatically drop the needle down, and you'll hit it again and bring it back up, and it's going to do the same thing that I just did here manually. This machine's not plugged in, so I can't show you that feature, but it's going to give you the exact same result. And then you're going to put your cover on, and you're ready to sew. All right, so on our bobbin threading for the Singer 503, normally I would use a metal bobbin in here, a class 66. You can use plastic, but sometimes you'll get a little bit of static effect with the plastic rubbing on the metal. But honestly, either one is really fine. I just want you to be able to see the thread, so I'm using a plastic one with red thread. So you're going to, like the other ones, drop your bobbin in. You're going to have it going the exact same position we talked about. Your thread is winding counterclockwise. The only exceptions I can think of for this is the Elna machine. On an Elna, your bobbin case is in the back and it winds the opposite. It's going to go, you're still going to put it in the same position, but it's going to go the other way. So I can't really think of a machine that's top loading where the thread goes a different way. So it's safe to assume you're going to drop your bobbin in with your thread coming off, winding to counterclockwise. So we're going to drop this in, and you're going to see, and you should be able to see on the edge of your bobbin case, there's going to be a little metal lip right here, an edge, and you're going to draw your thread under that and pull it out to the left. So now you can see my thread is under that little metal piece. So that's, and if I pull up, it stays in there. So again, you're going to leave yourself a bit of a tail. I'm going to hold my upper thread tail with my left hand. I'm going to turn the hand wheel always toward you, never away from you. Pull up that thread. You can see it wrap around, and you can grab your scissors or some tweezers and pull these threads up. Now you have both threads, the top and bottom, in your left hand ready to sew. And then you're just going to close your needle plate. So let's talk about how to insert the bobbin correctly on a machine that is either front loading or side loading. So that's what we mean by front loading or side loading. The other one we talked about is drop in, which means the bobbin drops into top. This is a Singer Tradition, which is a very basic, probably one of Singer's most basic machines you can purchase. And they commonly are front loading. The Singer Simple, I think even the Patchwork model, I think, is front loading. And then on your side loading, a lot of the more advanced, like heavier duty machines like Juki, Brother has a similar model that loads on the side. And then you have a lot of vintage machines that do load on the side. So this is going to cover basically getting your bobbin inserted correctly every single time. Okay. So we're going to start by taking the bobbin case out, and you just use a little latch there on the front, and it does snap. You don't have to use the latch to put it in, but it is there if you're having issues. It does just snap in, but you just pull that little lever out a little bit, and if you pull the lever and then pull it out by the lever, it'll release every time. All right. So what I have here, this machine takes a class 15. Almost every single front and side loading machine takes a class 15 bobbin. Your exceptions to that are going to be Viking and Pfaff. And I think that's really your biggest exceptions. If you have a specialty machine that uses like a class L, it may be different, but most of your vintage, I can tell you almost certainly that all vintage Japanese machines that are front and side loading, like an Atlas or a Deluxe or any of the numerous versions you see, they do use class 15 and class 15 bobbins cases. Okay, so in this machine, it uses a plastic class 15, which is what I have here. And I do have red thread in here so you can easily see what I'm doing. And we're going to talk about how to insert this properly. So the first thing I want you to do is take a look at your bobbin case. And I want you to know what parts are on here. So you have the lash that we talked about. The other big thing to note is this big metal plate that goes across the top here, and you can kind of see the seam edge on it. Otherwise, with it being all metal in a glare, it's hard to see. This is actually your tension spring. And it's not a spring in what we think of in traditional springs, but basically when you tighten this screw here, it puts more pressure on this plate, and this is where your thread comes out. So this is what determines how much tension your bobbin is getting. All right. So when you look at your bobbin case, what's important to note is the outlet on the left or on the right? On this particular bobbin case, it's on my left. And this is important because this is going to determine what direction you put your thread in. And I will have this in the handout. There's a quick reference in there for you. So if you're looking like this one, if your thread, the tensioner is on the left side, then your thread needs to wind clockwise. So when I say that, if you look at the way the thread is winding on the spool, it's winding clockwise or to my right. Okay. And it gets inserted that way. And then you pull the thread back through and draw it through the tension until it comes out in that little spot. So if you can see, it's coming out on this side. Okay, as another example, what I have here is a customer's featherweight bobbin, and I pulled this one just because it's an easy example. There are class 15 cases that do have the spring on the opposite side, depending on the setup of the machine. But I wanted to have an example of what it looks like when the tension spring is on the other side. So if you look at how this one is set up, there's actually 2 screws, and the spring now ends on the right side. So when you're inserting your bobbin into a bobbin case where the tensioner ends on the right side, your thread needs to be winding counterclockwise. So again, I have a reference for this in the handout that you can put with your machine so that you have a reminder if you need to. But you're going to insert this as it's winding counterclockwise. So once you insert it into the bobbin case, you're going to draw the thread to the right and through that tension spring. And now you can see it's coming out of that side. I want to say that there might be a few exceptions, and they're very rare. There's like 2 models of Berninas where it's the opposite, but please refer to your manual. But this is almost a fail-safe way to load your bobbin properly every time. And if you have any questions, if you have a machine that you're unsure of or you're having issues, feel free to comment or even send me a message, and I'm happy to help you figure out how you should be loading your bobbin. I want to reiterate, this is very important that they are loaded properly. If you have your bobbin in backward, you're going to have tension issues, broken threads, looping, thread nesting. It's the symptoms are going to be different, but you're not going to get successful stitches. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back in the machine.